Our business is still pretty new, so depending on what happens, it's really going to put a strain on our business, and we'll have to pass that on to the customers. And then can the customers afford less services, more charges? I don't know. I think it'll definitely make a difference.
Well, I'm not knowledgeable enough about the two proposals. In a very general sense, obviously, every new tax on business is a difficult thing to deal with. I personally don't think it would matter too much to our business. We're too small to be particularly impacted on it. But I think there is economics 101. We know any business tax is holding back development. So just as a general statement, I certainly think that I hope that they find another way to raise money.
And you feel as a business that in some ways you're penalized for being successful, number one, and number two, anytime you hear limitations, it reminds me of Weicker, where we had 1 year income tax, and now we're saying a 3-year tax, and I don't think anybody believes that will only last 3 years. Once it's in place, it'll be part of your dinner table for a long, long time. And like we've all discussed, I mean, anytime there's an increase on expense, you have to decide whether or not to pass that along to your customer or make adjustments to either the product or the service, or something has to give. There's no magical money tree that any of us pluck to pay those taxes.
What concerns me about the current deficit situation is that the government spending is currently unsustainable. That's why they're looking at raising taxes. However, as a business owner, I've never seen costs go down. Year after year, they keep going up, which means the costs on what the government is spending is also going to have to go up. So if they're raising taxes now just to meet the deficit and cover what they're spending now, they're going to have to come back in a few years and raise more taxes because their costs will have gone up unless they find a way to cut spending. So, looking at government like a business, what have you seen that you think is something? Now, I know we've discussed how much an employee costs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, what I've recently done is, as we do continue to grow and hire new employees, you have to really have a sense of what that employee costs. And it's not just about their hourly wage, it's the benefits that are thrown into there and other factors, even including calculating payroll expenses. So, like you said, those expenses don't go down, and on average, they're about 30% of what an hourly wage is. And those are costs sometimes businesses don't calculate when they're trying to project total cost. But I think the point is that you make a point to live within your means as a business. And especially right now, there aren't a lot of opportunities to get loans, and the money hasn't more recently been flowing too freely. But we're responsible for making sure that we're able to pay our bills and be able to stay solvent. And when you look at the government, like, where is that responsibility? Who holds that responsibility? Who holds that responsibility, and how do we hold government responsible for making sure that they stay within their means?
Now, you just mentioned, total cost of an employee is about 30% above their salary. Now, there have been recent studies that show government employees, the cost of them is 60% above their salary. So the government is paying their workers more, and like a business, trying to charge their customers more. Now, something I recently found of interest, the Democratic proposal, they've made a big deal about raising the taxes on the wealthiest people in the state. So basically, they're going after their highest value customers and raising their costs. Now, approximately 2 years ago, possibly a little more, AT&T started offering television service. And because they couldn't wire the entire state all at once, they went into different areas. And they target areas where it was more affluent, where people could better afford their service. Which is essentially the same thing the government is doing in targeting wealthier citizens for higher taxes. Attorney General Blumenthal took AT&T to court to stop them from doing this. So, I mean, what is your opinion on our legislature essentially saying businesses have to be held accountable for not just what they spend, but who they target as a customer, while when it comes to raising the state's funds, they don't feel bound by the same rules?
Well, I've always felt the state should be run like a business, but I've always found that they have different rules. Friends that I have that work for the state, I know a few of them have just retired, and they're not even 60 yet. They have enough to live on the rest of their lives. They have great benefits, and they don't feel competitive with the person that sits next to them. They are rewarded by how long they're there, and not necessarily by how much they do.
Right, so it's not pay for performance.
Right. And that seems to me, that's huge. Why shouldn't they run it just like a business?
Absolutely.
And be accountable for what they spend?
Sven, any opinions on this?
No, I think it's just generally foolish government policies that lead to these situations. It's clear that success, business growth by low cost, and that brings in more money. Over the years, I had businesses in Illinois, Wisconsin, Arizona, California, and now here, and it's the same problem everywhere. And it seems like the states that offer the most benefits to the people are the hardest to work. California is sort of the dream state, but it's very expensive to be there. And you know, there's a real disincentive to grow much, because it just eats up the cost. But it is the way it is, and I think I have my own business. I've gone through the regular bell curve, and I started alone at home and grew to be a pretty big business, and now I'm back to single person. I'm not going to have, I promised myself some years back, never again have staff. The paperwork has killed us. And with all the states and all the stores that we had, it was a nightmare. But we survived it, and I'm back to myself alone again. But it shouldn't be that. It should be an incentive to grow. But it isn't. We know that the reality is a business. The hardest part is to run the payroll.
Yeah, you make an interesting point. Essentially, the regulations on what you can do with employees has made you decide you don't want to have any employees. Mm-hmm. However, statistically throughout the United States, small businesses are the largest employers. More employment comes from small business than any other source. And here we have government regulations essentially disincentivizing small businesses to hire people.
Yes, that's true.